Hey guys, welcome to the Kim Constable podcast. After many technical errors going wrong there, I'm finally here with Dr. Tyna, who actually very kindly said to me, "Do you want to reschedule?" I was like, "No, I absolutely do not," because my audience have been dying for this interview. So I promised them I would bring it to them. And genuinely, Tyna, thank you so much for your time. I am so excited to have you here, and I know my listeners are too.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm excited. And no problem. I get the whole tech gremlins issue. It happens.
Oh my goodness. But anyway, we are here. This conversation was meant to happen. It's funny because my audience have been saying to me, like, "Oh my God, like I can't believe that you and Tina are together." Like apparently a lot of them have been following you for a long time. And some of them have been saying to me that they really wish that you and I would have come together sooner. So apparently this is a match made in heaven. Right, let's just give anyone who has been living under a rock and doesn't know who you are, Tina. You are. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do in the world, and why the hell we should even listen to you anyway.
Sure. So I am a naturopathic physician and a chiropractor, and I have been in this space for over 30 years. Before I even was licensed, I've been in this space, in the holistic and functional medicine space. I had the privilege of having an exceptional mentor who taught me all things regenerative medicine. So the focus of my practice for the past many, many years has been in that space of healing joints, tendons, and ligaments, musculoskeletal issues with natural solutions. Peptides are naturally a part of that conversation. And so I think the reason I'm here today on your show is because about 2 years ago or so, I started 2.5, I started deep diving into the topic of GLP-1 agonists that your listeners will know better as Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound. And I started looking at their mechanism of action because the entire internet at the time was blowing up, just chirping on and on this really propagandized narrative. And what cued my ears, my bullshit radar and propaganda radar is pretty strong. And what cued my ears was the fact that the functional medicine community at large was also parroting what the mainstream media was at the same time, which those two don't usually go together. And so I thought, this is really interesting. And my podcast producer asked me to do a show about Ozempic and weight loss. And I don't really like talking about weight loss. I'm not a fan of that conversation. My wheelhouse is much more metabolic health, musculoskeletal medicine, hormones, the midlife shifts that happen in perimenopause, menopause, and how that impacts your metabolism and strength training. And my message has been for well over a decade is, get strong, not skinny, which I know you align with and your audience aligns with. So, put on the muscle, get your hormones in check, and the good things will come from that. Something I noticed in my clinical practice, however, that I had not experienced up until a few years ago personally, was this shift that was happening in midlife women where they would show up to my clinic and they were the most disciplined folks, much like yourself, like tracking every macro, making sure their food was completely in alignment with their goals, making sure their HRT was on point. They were doing all the things right, as I call it. And they would show up in midlife and suddenly there would be like 10 pounds around their midsection. And something that I call the thickening, which is where that the midlife woman starts to thicken up a bit. And it was happening to me as I was researching these GLP-1s. But the most interesting part is my research always starts top down. I always go brain and then all organ systems down from there. So it's usually brain, pain. That's my wheelhouse, right? Brain, pain, and then on from there. And then what's the impact on the musculoskeletal system? All the data I was finding was completely in conflict with what the mainstream media was chirping at the time. And so I came out talking about it about 2 years ago on my podcast and caught a rash of heat that you could not imagine. And it was very interesting because I pushed back really hard during COVID and I took on the industrial censorship complex at like full force. And I paid dearly for it. This was akin to that, except instead of there being a small army of people pushing back that we were all together, it was just me. I mean, I was literally out there saying, hey guys, you're not getting told the truth about GLP-1s. The horrific side effects you're hearing about are not actually adding up in the literature or clinical practice. And also here's all these potential benefits outside of weight loss and type 2 diabetes that you're not hearing about that are fairly miraculous. And I got hit hard for that. So I went out on the podcast circuit because a lot of big podcasters were inviting me on to talk about this. And I spent the last year and plus going on shows talking about this and continued to catch a lot of heat. So it's starting to quiet down now because the data is finally catching up with what I've been saying. And my hypothesis all along has been that there are some pretty profound healing, anti-inflammatory, and regenerative impacts to these peptides across multiple organ systems that we had not heard about until recently. But the data is finally supporting what I've been saying in humans. We're finally getting clinical trials on safety, on efficacy, and the like. And so here we are.
And what was it that you were pushing back against?
During COVID, or
no, whenever you said you were the only voice pushing back on the GLP1s, like explain to us what was it that you were seeing, and what was it that you were determined to push back against? Because I think we're kind of aligned on this a lot. I would love to hear your perspective.
Everybody was saying they were going to kill you and they were poison and they were deadly. There was a lot of fatophobia happening. That was very interesting to witness firsthand. I've got a sizable platform. I've got, hundreds of thousands of followers across various platforms. And so I heard a lot of feedback, and it was very interesting the amount of people that came out, and no matter how I proposed it, I could show a study showing benefits for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. I could show a study showing benefits for cardiovascular system. It didn't matter what I brought forth. People were like, just eat less and move more. You don't need these for weight loss. And I was like, I'm not even talking about weight loss, lady. And it was fierce. I mean, the mainstream media came out and slandered me. I don't have the right credentials for them because I don't have MD after my name. I have ND, even though
you don't have a penis.
Right. In the United States, there are fake NDs and there are real NDs, and we go through 4 years of medical school and we hold licenses and we can prescribe and we're real doctors. And my whole career was dropping 4-inch needles into people's spines and prescribing them hormones. So I think I could, my student loan debt would probably support the fact that I am a real doctor. My license, my DEA number, all of those things that are real. And so there was just this, the obesity doctor community was pushing back, saying, I was talking about microdosing. I pioneered this concept of utilizing very tiny incremental doses to support different body systems that had nothing to do with weight loss and type 2 diabetes. Although ultimately we were supporting metabolic health, which is really my wheelhouse. That's my platform. And I was trying to share this story with people, and everybody just wanted to talk about weight loss and how we didn't need it for weight loss and how it was the easy way out. And so the podcast I would end up on more often than not would find me defending their use for standard care, where I was trying to have a conversation about longevity medicine over here. And even getting back to the obesity doctors, they were coming down on me saying microdosing is not we don't have any clinical studies on this. This is not standard of care. And the whole conversation over the last year and a half has really woven itself into this microdosing for weight loss, which is not what I was talking about. And in fact, I don't actually think it's a good weight loss strategy whatsoever. I think for women like you and I who are really metabolically optimized, we've got our shit together, we've got our macros dialed in, we've got our strength training going on, we've got our hormones on board, we optimize our sleep, we do all the things. I think for women like you and I, it definitely can take a layer of fluff off. But for the average American woman or man, microdosing is not a weight loss strategy. So that's a whole other thing that's happened, is the shift of, the inmates are running the asylum, these telemedicine companies popped up, everybody jumped on board for this microdosing for weight loss, like it was some kind of vanity weight loss to get the last 5 or 10 pounds off. That's not at all the narrative that I was trying to, or the story I was trying to share. So I was having to try to clarify my message on that, getting pushback from that group. It was crazy. And a lot of the big scaries you're hearing about just simply aren't true. They are sensationalized clickbait headlines. And usually coming from somebody who's got, I'm guessing, something to lose with GLP1s being out there on the forefront. I think that we've got some vested interest from some industrial complexes, because diabetes and obesity are very profitable to a lot of industries, and a lot of these industries are potentially I think the ones behind some of the push of this propaganda. So
What is microdosing, Tyna? I get that asked a lot, because whenever I started talking about my journey, in fact, you know what, just for those who are listening who maybe don't know about how this conversation even came about, I'll tell very quickly my backstory. I was talking to my gardener one day, as you know, and he said to me, "Did you hear Weight Watchers have gone out of business?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And he said, "It's, they're saying it's because of, Ozempic and the weight loss drugs." And I just had this ding ding moment. And I thought, I have tens of thousands of women in my communities and no one is talking about this. But if this is big enough to put Weight Watchers out of business, then clearly everyone's doing it, but no one's talking about it, which means they're ashamed of it, which means it's some dirty little secret. Because all I'd heard about Ozempic is the big one that everyone's heard of, but all I'd heard was, oh, it makes you lose your muscle mass, and it does this and does this. All I'd heard was negative stuff on it, people losing loads of weight but damaging their bodies when doing it. So I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to it. But whenever I heard that, I thought, oh, this is a problem, because obviously my women are doing it, but they don't feel they can talk about it. Let me come out and talk about this with them and make a safe space for them to talk about it, so we can support them better. So then, of course, I went down the rabbit hole of starting to look into GLPs, and well, I thought, well, I'm going to arm myself with Ozempic. What is it? What does it? What does it do? Whatever. Which led me then to find you. And I had watched your podcast. It was on Stephen Bartlett's podcast. I had watched it, or it had come up, and I'd watched parts of it, I guess, about a year ago. But it wasn't something that was really in the forefront of my mind, so I hadn't, paid a lot of attention to it. It was good. It was great, but I hadn't, dived into it as much. But I went back to listen to it with great detail. And I remember, like, I could barely sleep that night whenever I heard you talk about, microdosing and what it is and what it does and what it did for you. I was like, this woman's literally describing me. She's describing everything that I've gone through: the brain fog, the clarity, the pain, the joint pain, the inflammation, the menopausal, the perimenopausal stuff. And that's whenever I then thought, well, I'm bloody well going to do this. I feel like I'm very in control of my own body. I was like, so I found a doctor to prescribe off label. I told him exactly what it was I wanted. He said, I have no data on this. He went and bought your course, apparently. And he said, but informed consent, I'm more than happy to prescribe it for you. And I started sharing my journey online. And then the backlash that I got from it was astonishing to me.
Astonishing. Yeah.
Astonishing. So let's dive into that. First of all, what I want to, if you could give us a little bit of your personal backstory. By the way, can you tell me how long you have? Just because we didn't discuss that in the beginning, just so that I know not to run over.
Oh, I'm good. I'm good for like an hour or so. I can go about
Excellent.
An hour or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I know I was late getting started.
That's okay.
But this is such a valuable conversation. So I want you, if you would, to give me a little bit of your backstory, where this all came from, how you came about it, and then what microdosing is and what you've seen from the health benefits of microdosing.
Sure. Well, I want to first start with saying what it is not. Since talking about this and bringing up this strategy, I've had friends, colleagues, people come at me and say, I don't know why you are claiming to have pioneered anything. We've all been doing this for years. And that's entirely untrue. Maybe some doctors in some places have, but I was very careful to interview every single colleague I could possibly get my hands on who I knew were using these peptides in their clinics and in their clinical practice. And all of them, even if they were using them on the lower end of the standard dosing protocol, were using them for weight loss or for body composition or for appetite suppression. None of them had actually started using them for the anti-inflammatory benefits or the brain impacts or the cardiovascular impacts. And so, or any kind of preventative way. I'm a naturopathic physician, so I'm always about preventing anything before it happens. I'm a big fan of treating things before they become a problem, because when that woman walks into my office and says, I've been doing everything, I've been doing everything right, I haven't changed a thing, and I've got 15 pounds around my midsection out of nowhere since I hit, age 48 or 50, I believe her. And that's insulin resistance starting. That's what that is. That's a clinical indication of insulin resistance starting. I have no clue why we would wait until they arrive at obesity before we decided to treat them, right? So that's how I function. Anyway, just a little bit backstory on how I treat. So I'm interviewing everybody, asking them, like, have you tried using it at a tiny increment of the standard starting dose for anything off label? And all of them said no. So fast forward.
Can you tell us, first of all, what off-label is, just for people who don't know?
Well, it's legal to use medications and prescription medications off-label. And what that means is, even though they're not FDA approved for a specific use, you can use them for other things, right? Okay. So there's a myriad of pharmaceuticals that we use off-label, and it's completely legal and it's completely fine. And my thinking was, as I started to research GLP1s, we make it endogenously in our body. It's made in the L cells of our guts, and it's made in our brain. And as I dove into the literature, I found piles and piles and piles of data going back over 20 years showing potential impact on rodents and humans, on benefits, anti-inflammatory, regenerative, and healing benefits on the brain, on the cardiovascular system, on the kidneys, on the pancreas. Literally regenerating those tissues and decreasing inflammation in those regions. And I thought, well, this is not at all what we're being told. Like, this is not at all what the current, this, remember back 2 summers ago or 2 springs ago, like it was all over the media. Ozempic's killing people. Ozempic, it's from the Gila monster and you're all going to die. And my thinking was this: I treat them with physiologic doses of hormones, even if they're nowhere near menopause, even if they're nowhere near the age where you think they would need them. If they show low on thyroid hormone or on estrogen or on progesterone or on testosterone, even if they're in their 30s, I want them to have healthy physiologic levels. And so I will sprinkle a little hormone in there. And I've been treating this way for decades. Like, this is how I've always done things. I have never been afraid to prescribe hormones. The Women's Health Initiative 20 some years ago did not scare me away from it. And so I got to thinking, well, what if there's a functional, because in many cases, these are functional deficiencies, meaning the woman's or the man has burned themselves out, right? So an example would be a young man has several head injuries in high school and college because he plays hockey or he plays soccer or football. And then he gets into my clinic in his 30s or 40s and his testosterone's in the toilet because of these multiple head traumas, right? That's a direct cause and effect. We know that head traumas lead to low testosterone. Of course, I'm going to give this young man testosterone, right? And of course, I'm going to give him a informed consent and let him know, hey, this could shut down your natural endogenous production. This could be an issue, but we're going to do such tiny low doses. We just want you feeling better. I want your pain down. I want your headaches to go away. I want your mood to improve. I want your depression to lift, all of the things that we see. In a woman, for instance, a woman who's had a very high stress life, she's going to show up with low progesterone and low thyroid often. I'm going to give her a physiologic dose of those. And in many cases, it's the tiniest little bit. Most doctors don't treat this way. And so I understand that it's going to be hard for folks to find someone to treat this way, but this is how I've been doing it in my little bubble, right? So I thought the same thing about GLP-1s. I thought, what if there's a functional deficiency, meaning the chronic leaky gut, the chronic gut inflammation? I've never tested anyone's gut and not seen gut inflammation, to be honest with you. I've never seen a perfectly healthy gut. I've never seen perfectly healthy progesterone levels. I've never seen any of these things be ideal. I've always usually, we got to pull some levers with folks. And I thought, what if they have a functional GLP-1 deficiency? Not an overt genetic deficiency, but a functional deficiency, meaning years, decades of gut inflammation, gut issues leading to their poor L cells being petered out. What if old age, which we know causes gut lining atrophy, is inducing the L cells to sort of peter out? What if all the chronic stress that we know chews up certain regions of the brain has impacted the regions of the brain that secrete GLP-1? If it's secreted in the brain and it's got receptors in the brain, it's probably pretty important in the brain, not just in the gut. It's not just about slowing down gastric motility and making you feel fuller longer, which was the story we were all getting. And so I started thinking, well, what if we can't test for it? There's no good lab test for GLP-1 levels, but what if folks really are functionally a little bit deficient or a lot deficient, and I were to replace what they were missing? Very much in line with hormone replacement therapy theory. And so that's what I did. That's how this all started. I started giving people very tiny little doses, and this might be a fifth of the standard starting dose, a tenth of the standard starting dose. I never use these peptides in isolation. I have other peptides on board. I always make sure HRT is on board. I always make sure to treat their gut first. There's a lot that goes into this. This is what I talk about inside my course because it's a comprehensive treatment program. We don't use them as monotherapy, meaning GLP-1s alone at high doses are not the solution. And so this is what I started talking about. This is what caught on. And then I took a whole lot of slack for that because a lot of doctors don't understand this approach. But to me, it just makes sense. Like, give the body what it needs that it's missing. And then in the meantime, figure out why it's missing it. But we got to buy ourselves time. If someone comes in with completely tanked out adrenals or completely tanked out thyroid function, I'm going to give them support while I figure out why they're burning the hell out of their thyroid and adrenals, right? Mm-hmm. So as I treat the gut and fix the gut and heal the gut, I'm certainly going to be, and the metabolism and the brain fog and the neuroinflammation, I'm certainly going to be sorting out why those things are like, why is there still lighter fluid being poured on the fire? But in the meantime, let's replace what's missing or deficient. And that's what I started with my patients, with my family members, with my friends, with all of my colleagues I literally called up every single girlfriend of mine that was a naturopathic physician who had a license to prescribe. And I said, here is my hypothesis. I would love to know if you're interested in trying this. I'll guide you through it. And then I had a lot of influencers on my phone messaging me. And this is how I know that a lot of these docs who've been claiming to be doing this forever have not been doing it forever, because I get messages from their patients who are a lot of the online influencers themselves. They're seeing the famous doctors, and I hear from them. They're like, I'm on the couch dying, puking my guts out. What's going on? And I'm like, well, what dose? They said I was being microdosed. I feel awful. And I say, what's your dose? And they tell me, and I'm like, oh, honey, that's like 10 times more than I would give you. So lots of different reasons to use it that I've used it clinically. There's short-term goals, there's long-term goals, but ultimately these peptides are having some pretty remarkable impacts. The dose is individualized. It's a clinical strategy that I introduce in my course so that it teaches physicians and the general public to think through this, because once you hear it, it makes more sense. But it's just a tool in a comprehensive tool belt, and it's a really powerful one.
Tell us, what is a peptide? Like, break it down for my listeners.
Sure. So these are not drugs as you would classically think of a drug. Most pharmaceuticals go into the cell and have an impact. They either go through the cell wall, they either do something to the organelles inside the cell, or they go into the nucleus and have some impact on the DNA. And they change the way that molecular pathways go in the body. The way that these medications work is they just happen to be co-opted by big pharma, I think because of their delivery system. They're injectable is how they work best. And so they are actually peptides. Peptides are simply strings of amino acids that are bound together with peptide bonds. And a simplistic way to look at it is groups of peptides make up a protein, and our whole body's made of proteins, which means our whole body's made of peptides, which means our whole body's made of amino acids at the end of the day. And we get our amino acids from the foods that we eat, most notably protein. So that's it in a nutshell. And what happens with GLP-1 that's made in the body is it's in and out of the system within a few hours. So it is stimulated from the L cells when you eat food, when you eat glucose, actually, when you eat a bolus of food, when you eat protein. This will stimulate the L cell to go. There's a lot that needs to happen in there, though. We've got to have a healthy harmony going on for the L cell to actually even secrete the GLP-1. And then for it to work, it plays with leptin and ghrelin and a lot of these other signaling peptide hormones. That's at the end of the day what GLP-1 is. It's a signaling peptide hormone. And so they all have to play together as an orchestra for any of them to work on your appetite. We know that these work on appetite. We think they do a whole lot of other things in the body that we're not even aware of yet. And so I think of it as a symphony. And a lot of folks are leptin resistant, meaning they're making a ton of leptin or they don't have enough, and they end up not being able to hear it on the other side. So that was another part of my hypothesis is what if there's a GLP-1 resistance going on? I look into it further, and it turns out that we have data, those who have fatty liver and those who have type 2 diabetes for sure have lower levels of GLP-1. They secrete way lower levels. And then there was a study that I found going back years where they looked at obese folks next to their lean counterparts, and they fed them both fat, and they both had nearly identical GLP-1 secretion from their gut in the face of fat. But when they were fed refined carbohydrates, the obese group barely made any GLP-1. Which explains why folks will overeat carbohydrates. And I'm a carb addict, so I get it. Very interesting stuff. Anyway, to answer your question, we're dealing with a pharmaceutical version where they've tweaked it so that it has a longer half-life. That's it. Semaglutide, which we know as Wegovy or Ozempic, is made by Novo Nordisk, and it is bioidentical to the version that we make in our body, except it's got a little tweak on one of the amino acids to make it last longer in the body. Mounjaro, also called Zepbound, is made by Eli Lilly. It is tirzepatide. Tirzepatide is a GLP-1 agonist and a GIP agonist, which has a bit of a different mechanism inside the body. But at the end of the day, when we're talking GLP-1s, we're talking semaglutide. If we want the higher level of GLP-1, when we're talking about the anti-inflammatory benefits, the immune benefits, they sit on our immune cells and they actually stabilize our immune cells. GLP-1s do. We have GLP-1 receptors on our immune cells. We have them all throughout our body, and it does all kinds of different things throughout the body. But at the end of the day, it is having an anti-inflammatory and regenerative impact on the tissues.
Why do you think there's so much fear around them? Why do you think people are so fearful and judgmental and scared? What's your theory?
Well, being on the receiving end, like I said, I was like the one person out there waving my flag talking about this, and I took a lot of shit. I took a lot of shit from my colleagues. I took a lot of shit from the online influencers. It was relentless. To this day, I'm accused of being a big pharma shill.
Oh, I can,
you know,
I can understand. I've had like it for 2 weeks and I'm like, how has this woman survived this for years?
I think a lot of it's obesity bias. Just be straight with you. I think it's very interesting. I don't want to speak for any one group of people that I haven't lived in their shoes, because I don't do that. But as somebody who has grown up as a fairly thin woman, I can speak from that angle. It's given a lot of thin women competition. A lot of thin women really hang their hat on the fact that they've had the discipline and they've had the wherewithal to keep themselves thin in the face of this crazy toxic planet we live on, and that they did not ever let the weight gain catch up to them. And in many cases, that's the truth, right? There is a lot of discipline and there is a lot of work that goes into it. I'm not going to deny that. It requires a lot of work. However, there are many of us who also are somewhat genetically blessed to remain thin. And there are some who are genetically inclined to live with the real disease of obesity. It's a real disease, and there are many who suffer from it. So I think there's a complete misunderstanding of obesity. There's a complete misunderstanding of how fat actually works in the body. There's a misunderstanding of epigenetics and how your mother's health directly impacts whether you will be marked for life for an incredibly high increased risk for obesity and type 2 diabetes. They have no appreciation for the impact toxicity and stress have on the body. They have no appreciation for these things. And so they just immediately are like, eat less, move more, and you're lazy otherwise, and you're not disciplined and whatever. There's a cohort of folks in the health at every size movement who fairly enough say, we've worked so hard to try to get the fatophobia to diminish and to be treated as human beings on this planet and to lose some of the stigma. And now you're coming at us telling us that we need to be small again, that we need to. So there's pushback from that community as well. I understand both sides. There's a lot of industries that have something to lose here. So hypothetically, this is just my opinion, but I think that any big pharma company who doesn't have a GLP-1 in the pipeline is going to be missing out, because if these really do what the studies and the data and the long-term data are showing they do as far as being beneficial to the cardiovascular system, the brain, all these other things, this might potentially mean that a lot of other drugs become unnecessary, right? So I'm getting feedback. Like I said, I'm in a very particular situation. The other argument people say is, oh, you're not in your big clinical practice anymore, so you don't have any real experience with these. Contraire, people don't actually know how many patients I am or not seeing, or how many prescriptions I'm writing, or how many people I'm consulting with, but that's neither here nor there. The interesting part is I have hundreds of thousands of followers who give me feedback in real time, and I have hundreds of people inside of my course who give me feedback in real time. And here's what's going down. People are messaging me saying they were able to go off their antidepressants, their PCOS reversed, their lifetime of acne reversed, their lifetime of alcoholism was way wound down. These peptides got my husband out of a 50-year relationship with alcohol. People quit smoking on them. People have their pain decreased. People see improvements in their rheumatoid arthritis and some of the other inflammatory arthritis that are crippling, that lead to joint replacements. And so in my head, I'm thinking, well, that would mean that big food, big pharma, big agriculture, big tobacco, big alcohol, the diabetes industrial complex, the joint replacement industrial complex. There's a lot of industries that have something to fear with GLP-1s. And so I don't know where this propagandized barking narrative is coming from. Look at the functional medicine community. 9 times out of 10, the same big, huge voices that you'll see these, especially chiropractors, because they can't prescribe. They'll come out and say GLP-1s are the devil. They're going to kill you. They've got 1.5 million followers. The next week, they're telling you that another peptide that comes in oral pill form that they can sell you, BPC 157 is an example. Oh, that's great. That's a great peptide. Go ahead and buy it with my affiliate link. But God forbid you try a GLP-1. And the thing that I was so excited about you saying this was, most people in your situation have come out against it because they live in scarcity and they think that it's directly conflicting with their bottom line, versus what you're doing, which is to embrace it and support your audience and your followers and your students inside your programs to actually understand it, because it's not going away and people are on it. 1 in 6 Americans have used a GLP-1. I mean, that's the math. So I've been trying to tell the strength and conditioning community, the functional medicine community, anyone who'd listen, like, your patients are going to be on this and they're just not going to tell you, or your clients are going to be on this and they're just not going to tell you if you shame them. So why not learn about it, educate yourself, get informed, and help them, right? Like, let's do this right, because these peptides are actually regenerative to muscle. They do not erode muscle. That is such a misnomer. They're actually regenerative. They help revascularize the muscle. They help make it healthier. In metabolic health, I'm just going to go on a rant here. In 94% of US adults have busted cardiometabolic health. We have the data on that. That was 2018 data that was published in a 2021 study. So you can imagine how much worse it is post-COVID, right? Post lockdowns, I'm in Oregon. It was crazy. Everybody just stayed inside for years. So we have that and they shut down the gyms, of course. So we have that information. And when you look at the muscle of a metabolically compromised individual, it's marbled with fat. So the data around the muscle loss, first of all, that's incorrect. The 40% number you keep hearing thrown around, that was only in one study. In most studies, it's 20 to 30%. That's right in line with any severely calorically restricted diet. So anytime a patient goes on a very low calorie diet, that is the percentage of lean mass, overall lean mass. And I'll explain what that is in a minute to your audience. That is the percentage of lean mass lost. Same thing with bariatric surgery. So these peptides are not inducing further lean mass loss. They are just, it's the caloric restriction part. That's really, I think, the culprit here. So just don't starve your patients. Don't dose them into oblivion so that they completely get their appetite crushed and they don't want to eat anything, right? What they do is they are regenerative, healing, and anti-inflammatory to the muscles and to the bones. They do not cause osteoporosis. In fact, they're protective of the bones. So any big influencer doctors, I just heard a big PhD, huge influencer the other day say they're going to turn your bones to dust. And I was like, honey, first of all, you're a PhD. You don't actually have any medical training. And second of all, that is completely incorrect and not in alignment with what the data is showing. So that's the information that everybody's getting fed and they're terrified about it. Going back to lean mass, the interesting part is muscle is just part of your lean mass. Lean mass is all your soft tissues of your body. There's bone and there's soft tissues. That's your lean mass. So they're losing a percentage of lean mass overall. My hypothesis was that I think because of the fatty marbling that's happening with metabolically compromised individuals, their muscles literally get fatty, their liver gets fatty, their pancreas gets fatty. All of this fatty marbling that's happening, they have very pathologic muscle. The muscle of a diabetic is very different than the muscle of a well-trained individual like yourself and myself. So you're in way better shape than I am, but like I do hit the gym regularly. So I was thinking, I'm betting that a lot of this lean mass loss is actually loss of the marbling of the fat throughout the various organ systems, most notably the muscle. And that's why we're seeing a decrease in muscle size and volume. It's not actually that the muscle is eroding and degrading, right? And I kid you not, just yesterday, a study came out showing tirzepatide did exactly that. It was in fact protective. When they compared those on tirzepatide with those who did weight loss without tirzepatide, their muscle was better protected and the marbling was diminished further than those who just went into a low caloric state. So my hypothesis is proven now as of yesterday, a big study published, and I was like, Yahoo, I knew it. So that's what we're talking about. But like most doctors and most health influencers and most of the general public have no idea what real metabolic health is or how to reverse it, or reversing the compromise, and they don't understand these nuances. And so they just hear what they want to hear and they start parroting it all over the place, and it scares the shit out of everyone.
Yeah, and I think then that the media unfortunately then controls the masses, and so whatever. I have to tell you an interesting story. So I have to be very careful who I say here, just as I don't want to drop any names. But I have a friend, let's say, who has a friend who is editor of a very large publication in the UK. And both online and offline publication, and so in print, I mean. And so anyway, they were talking to this person about me and saying about, oh, this girl's doing amazing things, you should, totally feature her in the newspaper, she's really pushing this or whatever, supporting her members, and she's microdosing on Ozempic herself. And he was like, we can't touch this.
Yeah.
And she was like, why not? And he said because he said that a lot of the stories that you're seeing are paid for. They're
Yes.
paid advertorials. They're not, he said, we're not reporting the news. Those articles that you see, which is like over here, we're getting it. I don't know if you know who Robbie Williams is, you know, from Take That, like
Yeah.
Robbie Williams, you know, got scurvy from Ozempic, and what was the other one? And such, you know, and Sharon Osbourne.
Robbie Williams looks fantastic. He looks better than I've seen him look for years.
If he had a vitamin C deficiency that I was like, how can a peptide give someone scurvy? Like, can you please tell me about this? But it's like, nobody actually understands what it is. No. And so anyway, he told my friend that the media that we're seeing is paid for.
Yes.
It's so somebody is funding somebody is funding the scaremongering stories, and that's all people are hearing and seeing and parroting, because people spend all day scrolling on TikTok and scrolling on their phones. My daughter tells me this shit every day. She's like, Mom, did you know that such and such and such? And she comes up something about how, you know, she'll parrot something which is completely untrue. And I'll say, Maya, it couldn't even be true in reality, because let me tell you about this. Let me tell you about hydrogen atoms in fat. Let me explain what a saturated fat is, what a monounsaturated fat is, and what a polyunsaturated fat is. So here's how what you're saying couldn't be true scientifically. And she's like, but that's what everyone on TikTok is saying. And I'm like, who are these everyone, and why are you listening to them? And it just made me realize how much misinformation is getting passed around from people who just don't have a bloody clue. And I think that is what I'm seeing, you know. And then of course you've got the people who are like you and I, who go, okay, this is what the media is saying, so that must not be true. Let me go do my own research. That's the first thing they want me to do. What? Okay, well, let me just go and see what this is all about before I decide it. And then you've got the people in the middle who are like, oh my God, I'm terrified. I've heard the really, you know, crazy stories. But you know what, Kim? I trust you, and you wouldn't be doing or taking something that, you know, was going to harm me. So I'm going to hear. I'm open to what you have to say. And then you have the people who are like, you're wrong, you're bad, you're a, you know, I have people like hashtag fake vegan, you know, you've lost all your weight on Ozempic and you've been pretending it's because of your programs. And I'm like, oh my God, then you've got the extremist on the other side. And I was just like, why is this such an emotional subject? I am such an unemotional person, Tina. Like,
yeah, me too.
I am so data driven, and I maybe should have been a doctor, but I was like, I'm so data driven, and I'm like, oh wow, this is astonishing to me. So I'm just determined. I'm so glad you're here, because I'm determined to bring this side of the conversation, which is based in science and fact and data and hypothesis, which is then proven through clinical trials, to give people more information. Because I always say that where there's a lack of, like, fear is just a lack of data. So where people don't have data, there's fear, and there's so little data around this. And so I love that you're bringing this out. I love that you pushed this forward. I love that I'm sorry that you've had so much backlash over it. I do understand it. But the tide is definitely turning. And so I want to ask you a question though. Like, the biggest thing, I guess, that I have been getting now, because my audience is menopausal women like you, and now they all, because I'm doing it and I'm noticing incredible benefits. I also started testosterone, and I swear to God, I don't know whether it's the GLPs, the testosterone, but for the last week, I haven't woken up to pee during the night. I haven't woken up during the night at all. I get up at 4 a.m. because I wake at 4 a.m. I haven't woken at 4 a.m. in a week. I haven't opened my eyes till 6:45 in the morning. 6:45 is unheard of for me.
Yeah.
So women now are coming to me and they're saying, you know, I want to do this for menopause. I want a microdose. Where can I get a microdose? What can I do? You know, how can I do this? Of course, I'm like, I don't know. And I know you can't advise them, but what would you say? Like, what should I tell me what I should say to all my women, or how I should advise them, if that's possible?
I think that, you know, I get this question all the time, and I think the only solution is education. I have a free 4-part video series where people can get way further educated. And
where can they get that? Tell us now. We'll put it in the show notes.
It's at drtyna.com, drtyna.com. Just go to the very top of the website, or / Ozempic Uncovered. And that will get them there. That will get them a ton of free education. I have, over 20 hours of free education on my podcast on this topic. They'll find that also on my website. Just click the podcast link, and there's a page there that the whole series is listed out there. Beyond that, I have a course where I have a whole module inside on how to talk to your doctor, how to find a doctor, how to access these peptides, because it's a long conversation and there's multiple steps. But I think educating yourself, the course itself is beefy and it's for clinicians, but it's also open to the public because I just decided I can't gatekeep. There's people who, like yourself, are highly intelligent, who are not clinicians and who are highly educated and want that high level education. So that's who it's for. It's not for people who just want a quick fix, because there's a whole lot of levers that need to be pulled in order for a very tiny dose to work. The reason it works for you is because you are so healthy overall. That is not your average American woman, the average or European woman. The average woman on this planet is not going to get a massive weight loss benefit from a microdose. They might get a potent anti-inflammatory benefit, but in most cases, this strategy is reserved for those who are metabolically optimized already. So I want to make that very clear. Because I get messages all the time from people saying it didn't work. And I'm like, what did it not work for? And lo and behold, they've got 40 pounds to lose. It didn't work for weight loss. It didn't decrease their inflammation because they're no disrespect, but they're a dumpster fire of health. Like, they're literally eating whatever, I call it the whatever diet. They're not hitting the gym. They don't exercise. All of the things. They don't do any of the things that we need to be doing in midlife. I think in the midlife woman, who many of us got ourselves into middle age, we were training for, I joke, I've been training for menopause since I was 40. Like, I very strategically prepared myself for menopause. So by the time that it came, it was not a complete nightmare. And it's not been a complete walk in the park either. I have autoimmune issues. I have histamine issues. I've got gut issues. I've got all kinds of things, but like, a lot of stress. But for the most part, I am doing a whole lot better than most women. I'm almost 52 years old, I think I'm doing okay. But that said, I prepared for this so that it would be a skate through and not a complete nightmare that hits you and devastates you and throws you sideways. So if you've walked into menopause as a complete train wreck, this is probably not the best strategy for you. You are looking at a more standardized dose. I'm just going to be really clear.
Talking about microdosing isn't the best strategy.
Yes, it's
rather
not.
than
No.
the peptides aren't the best strategy.
It's for girlies like you and me. This is not for everyone by any stretch of the imagination. And
it's not a magic bullet, if you like. It's not a magic cure. That's what I've been saying to women. They've been coming to me going, oh, I was going to start HRT, but should I do this instead? I'm like, no. Go see your doctor, get on your hormones, start your HRT. Estrogen is the most important part first.
The other thing I'll say, I want to say two things. There's a lot of doctors out there now that have jumped on the bandwagon in advertising, and they're telling you they're microdosing you, and they're advertising to you microdosing, but they're not microdosing you. They're giving you the standard dose. It's just the low end of the spectrum. The way that this is dose standard is it starts at a lower dose, which I still think is too high for a lot of people. And then they ramp you up very quickly. That's how this has been going. So a lot of doctors and pharmacists have confused standard low dosing, maybe the first or second tier of the standard low dose protocol, and they're calling that microdosing. That is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about using a fifth to a tenth of the dose and needing a very, very tiny amount so we don't have any side effects. My patients don't have any side effects. We just get all the benefits, but that doesn't work in the average woman. So I just want to make that clear. But if you are on any dose of a GLP-1, you still need to be doing what I call all the things. And that starts with HRT. What I have found that even on the tiniest dose, these peptides, because of the impact that they have on healing our metabolism and really the regenerative properties that I believe they hold, they're unmasking deficiencies very quickly. And so I hear from my followers, all my hair is falling out and I'm on the tiniest dose, or I can't sleep. In some cases, it improves sleep. In some cases, it induces insomnia because they don't have enough estrogen or progesterone on board to keep them asleep. So it's unmasking the hormonal deficiencies like the thyroid, the adrenals, the sex hormones pretty readily. So if you're not getting your HRT dialed first and foremost, you are in for a bad time. Even on a microdose, that has been proven time and time again because like I said, I've been hearing from thousands of women over the past couple of years, and I'm taking notes. So, and I'm hearing from all my clinicians. I've got a ton of clinicians utilizing this strategy now in their practices. So I'm getting feedback from them in real time, and they're like, boy, you're right. Time after time. A lot of them didn't believe me because a lot of them don't do HRT in their practices. They just wanted to bring microdosing on board. And now they're calling me and they're like, nothing you've told me is working. And I'm like, do you have them in the gym and do you have them on HRT? No and no. Well, then it's not going to work. So that's the magic triad. It's HRT, it's strength training, and it's GLP1s. That's like the middle-aged girlies BFF, but none of this works if you're not doing the other two. And I'll tell you why. just in a really simplistic way, we've got this pathway called the AMPK pathway. This is the longevity pathway. This is the pathway that revs up your mitochondria. This is the pathway that a lot of the longevity medications work on. So when you hear about metformin being a longevity drug, or you hear about, different herbs and supplements, they're working on revving up AMPK. The thing no one tells you is AMPK has to counterbalance with mTOR. mTOR is the pathway that we ignite when we eat protein, when we strength train, when we do things that are anabolic. So AMPK left on its own is catabolic. mTOR is anabolic. It has to be a balance. That is how you optimize health. You can't just rev one side or the other. In the average US adult, they are mTOR dominant because their insulin resistance is so out of whack. And so they're in a pathologic mTOR state, which is, i.e., cancer growth. So AMPK things, revers like GLP1s are a godsend for them because it's giving them the opportunity for their body to actually come back into balance. But if you take a GLP1 at a super high dose for a prolonged period of time and you're not hitting the gym and you're not hitting your protein macros and you're not getting your HRT on board, my concern is you are revving AMPK so much that you will start wasting. So this is where that lean muscle loss is a concern for me for real. So strength training's the spark. Without it, you're dead in the water, period. GLP-1 or no GLP-1 in middle age. Like that, it's an absolute non-negotiable in middle age. It's a non-negotiable leading up to middle age. It's a complete non-negotiable if you're postmenopausal. Like if you do not want your metabolism, your bones and your muscles to turn to, and your brain and your cardiovascular system to literally turn to dust, you have to be strength training and you have to be getting adequate protein. If we add a GLP-1 on, now you've become more responsible to do that. So I want to make that very clear. This is not I'm going to take a little tiny dose and it's going to be amazing. Because even the gal who writes for the Daily Mail, who utilized my strategy and it completely changed her life, but I don't get credit for it. There's a lot of big publications that have written this up and give me zero credit, or they interview me and then they throw me under the bus and call me a health influencer and not a doctor. That's fun. But even in that,
didn't bother you at all. That sure didn't. No.
Yeah, even in those cases, now they're like, oh, well, now my hair's falling out. And I'm like, yeah, because you didn't do all the things. So my message was heard and people got excited. And as humans do, they only heard what they wanted to hear. And they heard microdosing weight loss. They didn't hear microdosing is only for those who have optimized their metabolic health already and who are doing all the things or who plan on doing all the things. And it's not a forever strategy. We have to cycle it. We have to rotate it. We use other peptides in conjunction. We use other nutraceuticals in conjunction. And there's this whole side where if you're not doing all the parts, I think you can start getting into trouble with them. So
do you think people are reactive to it? This is just a thought occurred to me the other day. Do you think people are reactive to it because they associate, because it's an injectable? I think that over here, there's a lot of, people have a lot of stigma. Like if you're self-injecting, it has a lot of, heroin drug connotations. I think if you're taking a tablet, totally fine. But if you are, injecting, it's like, oh, you're self-inject. Oh my God, you have to inject yourself. You're like, it's the tiniest needle. You don't even feel it going in, but I think that there's a lot of that stigma with it as well, probably in the US too.
Yeah. And I think also after what happened the past 5 years with the, intervention that was mandated across the globe, I think a lot of people are hesitant to take anything that big pharma has to dole out. So there's a lot of mistrust going on there. And I understand that. I've never claimed to be a purist. I'm a naturopathic physician at the core. I never approach, it's not first line therapy. Let's put it that way. I don't come at a patient and throw GLP1s at them. I use them very strategically. My whole way of treating it, that's what I lay out in my course, is this whole strategy of metabolic health. It truly is my clinical strategy to optimize a patient's metabolic health overall. I just wrapped it in a GLP-1 bow because GLP-1 fits into every single part of the story. And so it's gut health first, it's nutrient dense foods first, it's strength training and muscle optimization first. But we can't optimize muscle if it's pathologic and marbled and we don't have any hormones on board, right? And so how I approach a patient is never the same way twice. But that said, I eventually hit everything in the hierarchy, right? So we have to build the foundation first. And for those coming in with just a complete hot mess of health, a microdose is not going to get you out of it. It might turn down the fire for a minute, but it will stop working and you will have to increase the dose. And most folks looking at substantial weight loss, I would say over 20 pounds, are really looking at a standard dose. So there's 3 tiers of patients when someone approaches me. There's the women like us who are like, we're good. We just need a little sprinkling. Some of us have autoimmune disease. Some of us have chronic pain. Some of us have chronic injuries. Like, we still have shit wrong too, right? Like, we get dismissed at the average doctor because we're so much healthier than the average woman our age, but we need help too. And that's where this whole thing started. I was like, there's a whole cohort of women like you, like me, who've done so much work to get here so that we could be really healthy in our middle years. And now the wheels are starting to shake a little. And, you know, they're not falling off the bus, but they're like, oh, I'm not recovering the same I used to. My autoimmune disease is creeping up as my hormones are shifting. Like, I'm kind of in the, you know, it's like you're in the tornado a little bit. A little sprinkling of hormones, a little sprinkling of GLP-1, a little sprinkling of some other peptides, bam, dial it in. Then there's like, this, and I talk about this inside my free program. There's like the second tier of patient, and that would be the average woman who's probably got 30, 40, 50 pounds to lose. She might be a young woman who's had a few children and having a hard time getting the weight off. She might be an older woman who was good up until menopause, but she didn't prepare for it well. She's refusing hormones and the shit is hitting the fan. That woman is looking at a more standardized dose. And then we've got what most of this is, I think, getting the reason I'm sharing this is it gets back to what you were asking. I think most people think Ozempic, GLP1s, and they think of the very pathological patient. So that would be unfortunately, a huge percentage of America and Europe, which is the obese, the diabetic. By the time people get to type 2 diabetes and that being an actual diagnosis for them and their labs showing it, they have been in that pipeline for 15, 20 years. They have been going down the metabolic nightmare, and all of the bad things that happen in type 2 diabetes have been happening to them at least for a decade. The retinal damage, the kidney damage, the cardiovascular damage, the brain damage, all of it's been happening. And now it's like, oh, congratulations, you've arrived. Your blood sugars, your glucose fasting has hit 120. You have type 2 diabetes. And I'm over here, my entire practice and clinical strategy and what I've been trying to beat the drum on over here online for all these years is like, can we get you before you're anywhere near that? Like, I'm trying to pull women and men back when they're just starting to show glimmers. And so I'm pretty hardcore. When I get labs, I'm like, if anything's even slightly creeping up, I'm like, I just got my labs back and they were the middle age thing is happening to the labs, if you will, and everything's creeping up a little bit. And I sent them to my ND who's taken care of me for well over a decade. And I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, my labs look like complete shit. I don't know what to do. I sent them to 5 of my smartest girlfriends who are all doctors, who all have tons of clinical experience. Same thing. I was like, oh my God, what do I, am I missing anything? Cause I don't want to try to treat myself. I got to make sure I get other smart brains involved. And all of them said the same thing, Kimberly. They all said, those look great. Like, compared to everyone else our age, those look great. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this is what we've accepted. This is great. No, like, I want optimal. I want my labs to go back to being perfect.
Yeah. And there's no reason why they shouldn't with today's modern medicine and what's available.
So this is where I utilize peptides. And this is where I utilize all of the tools that I have available to me. And so I'm not trying to say that these can't help a whole myriad of people, but I think the conflict comes with the general public in that they're looking at this very pathological state. And they're looking at folks who are very far down the way saying, well, that's who needs them. You guys don't need them. Why would you use them? And I'm over here making an argument like the second that flubbery, blubbery fat comes on your midsection, I'm not looking for a 6-pack. Like, I've never been a girl that rocks a 6-pack. I've always had belly fat. But when it starts going from your boobs to your hips and it's out of your control and you really haven't changed anything, something's wrong. That's your cellular system barking at you that you're becoming cellularly insulin resistant, even if your labs aren't showing it yet, which is very common. Body composition changes before labs do. So that was where I came up with this. I just want to make that clear because I don't want your followers who maybe have 40, 50 pounds to lose to think, oh, I'll just take a microdose and everything will be fine.
No, definitely not. And it's funny, we're barking up the same tree. I love that you said that because one of the things that I learned, whenever I started studying menopause, because I'm like you, I entered perimenopause. I was like, okay, now I need to know every single thing about menopause, And so what I learned one day was whenever I learned about insulin resistance, I was like, oh my God, from about, that's my hypothesis. And actually you can tell me what you think of this, because I know that from about age 35, perimenopause starts. And so I I was like, your body recognizes that your ovaries are starting to fail. They don't have as many eggs. And so they start, it starts to create insulin resistance within your cell tissue to divert more energy to fat store to create more metabolically active fat stores that can produce estrone. And this kind of starts happening around age 35. But you don't really notice it until you're about 50 because it's happening internally in the metabolically active cells, which are internal. And then they're coming, and then suddenly boom, you look and you have this pregnant belly. Well, it didn't happen overnight. It's been happening for the last 10 years. You've only just noticed it now. But but here's the thing with modern medicine, like our bodies are still built for primitive times. And so our bodies don't know that we have estrogen available in a gel and a patch and a tablet, so it doesn't actually need to create an estrogen retirement fund, which is what I call it. We can just take it in a gel or a tablet. And so what I say is, why would you, in modern medicine, we can override the primitive urges of our body. We can take estrogen orally, and then we can, take something else to help with the insulin resistance that will stop this process in its tracks. And people are like, oh, but it's not natural, and your body is naturally doing this for a reason. It must be for a reason. Yeah, your body's doing it because your body doesn't know that estrogen is available under the counter. So it's creating an estrogen retirement fund, but it doesn't have to. So why would you not take the peptides that help with insulin resistance that stop the belly fat from coming on? It doesn't make sense.
Well, they don't understand something either, which is that estrone, which is so there's 3 types of estrogen, just for your listeners, which I know you know this, but I just want to share really quick. There's E1, E2, and E3. There's an estrogen that is secreted from the placenta. That's estriol. That's the one we put on our skin, and it makes us look so beautiful. That's why women look so glowy and beautiful when they're pregnant. There's estradiol, which is what the ovaries produce, which is what a healthy menstruating woman produces. It's a very potent estrogen, and it's the good stuff. And there's estrone, which is what fat produces. And that's what we have to rely on if we decide to, as I call it, raw dogging menopause. If you want to go raw dog menopause, good luck, because you're going to have to you're going to make more fat. As your estrogen drops, you will become more insulin resistant, whether you like it or not. And B, you will have bone loss, you will have cardiovascular insult, and you will have terrible things happening in your brain, whether you like it or not, because you're losing estradiol. Estrone will continue to be made more and more and more from your fat. And estrone is very inflammatory. So you're literally—
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I knew it was weaker. I didn't know it was inflammatory.
It is not a great thing. And in some people like myself, estrone is like poison. I feel off. I know when I am going into this aromatase state where my fat is making more estrone, and it is a vicious cycle because the more estrone you get, the more aromatase you make, and the more your testosterone converts into estrone, and you just feel like shit. And so women get into this loop with guess where the aromatase enzyme is? Belly fat. So it turns into this vicious cycle that's very difficult to break. What breaks it is estradiol. But that said, even with estradiol, I've been in practice a long time, and I've been using hormones a long time. And even when we add estradiol to a woman who's in that loop, I have not found a successful way to break it. I can put her on severe fasts. I can put her through intensive training. I can put her through programs like you offer. And often if her adrenals are fried and her thyroid's fritzed out, it just tanks her worse. And she gets worse and worse and worse. This is where having this lever, this beautiful, awesome peptide in a safe, individualized, personalized— I hate to use the term microdosing even, because I really would rather say personalized dosing. In a personalized strategy, along with a comprehensive treatment plan, that's the magic, because we can break the cycle. We can break that loop. And that estrone also, when middle-aged women are starting to complain of their autoimmune disease flaring up, their joints are hurting, that's all estrone's doing. So I'm not— in some women, estrone's okay. I think estrone in many is the enemy. And so I don't want that. The other thing, these women who want to do it naturally, we didn't live very long, right? Like there was not a long menopausal period.
Yeah, we died at like 60, 65.
Or 40 or 45 or in childbirth. We didn't live a long time. And so modern medicine has really lengthened lifespan. I would like to do it with my bones, my cardiovascular system, my metabolic health, and my brain intact. So I'm going to go with estradiol. The other part I will share is that estradiol from the pharmacy is bioidentical. Period. It is bioidentical. It may not come from a natural source, but people confuse natural hormones with bioidentical. Estradiol from the pharmacy, whether it's your patch, your pill, you name it, that is bioidentical. The part that is not bioidentical is when you get a progestin from the pharmacy. Now there's progesterone, there's micronized progesterone that's oral. You can get that from a regular pharmacy too. That is bioidentical to your progesterone. That's what we want on board when we're using estrogen, because we want to protect the endometrium and we want to protect our breast cells. But we confuse the fake progestin, which I think is really the culprit. And we've seen this in the data with the Women's Health Initiative. That's really the culprit and the problem in most cases when you hear about hormones causing cancer. It's progestins, it's synthetic progestins, but a bioidentical progesterone and a bioidentical estrogen are both available from your average pharmacy. I know it's frustrating because most doctors don't understand this. I know it's frustrating because it's the weirdest thing. You know, it's like they will give, if they cut your testicles off, if they cut a man's testicles off for whatever reason, testicular cancer, you name it, sure as heck, they're going to give them testosterone right away, so that they don't bottom out. But I read a statistic the other day. I couldn't believe it. 45% of women on this planet end up with a hysterectomy. Can you believe that? And 90% of them are unnecessary. How barbaric. I didn't think that was still going on. I was in a
male doctors, and probably an ovarectomy as well.
Oh yeah. So they go through surgical menopause and they're never offered hormones after.
They're not given. I was shocked when I found that out. They were literally, it's like they get a hysterectomy and it's like, okay, bye, your womb is gone, boom. And then they're forced into medical menopause and they're not even given any data as to how bad it's going to be or what's going to happen, or that, they're not given estrogen. I was horrified when I found that out.
It's barbaric. And my mom, I have to give my mom credit. Back when I was a teenager, my mom was fighting like hell to keep her ovaries and her uterus because it was just, everybody got a hysterectomy back then. That's just what they did. And I remember my mom going to a naturopathic doctor. I didn't even know what a naturopathic doctor was. I hadn't met my mentor yet. She's going to a naturopathic doctor. She's buying books and Suzanne Summers books, and she's fighting like hell to keep her organs. And she gets on bioidentical hormone replacement. I didn't know what it was, but my mom was she's so cute. Like, I don't think she realizes what a pioneer she was and how much she influenced
my mom was too. Because she didn't vaccinate any of us either. Whenever we were kids, she refused all vaccinations.
Yeah.
And she breastfed in a time when everyone was bottle feeding. She was like, I will not bottle feed my child. But anyway, go on. Tell me about your mom.
No, good mamas. So yeah, that was, I didn't realize this was still happening though. And I'm in a Pilates class the other day and I'm surrounded by all these women. And I kid you not, every single one of them at some point in whether they were older or younger than me, all of them had hysterectomies and had their ovaries removed. They all had belly fat. They were all complaining about painful joints. And I'm just sitting there keeping my mouth shut. Like, I don't really want anyone to know who I am wherever I go. Like, I don't. When people say, what do you do for a living? I'm like, oh, nothing.
I'm a stay-at-home mom.
I don't want to be recognized. I don't want questions. I don't want anything. And I'm just sitting there like, what is going on around me? Like, what am I hearing? And then I read this stat the other day, just made my blood boil. So that's what I think this misogyny you speak of has percolated into these women. And now these women are being so misogynistic against each other. And I get it all the time in my comments and stories on Instagram, women saying, well, I went through menopause. I'm 58 and I went through menopause naturally and you don't need it. And it's going to cause cancer and kill you. And like, it's like some badge of honor. And I'm like, good for you, Karen. Like, good on you. That
I made a video about it, actually, a really funny video went viral on Instagram about women who say but I would never take estrogen because I would never take HRT because it's not natural, and I go for walks in the country and drink my lemon water in the morning and meditate before I made this whole funny thing about it. And then I was like, whenever you take HRT, a lot of people I think confuse HRT with they say, well, I didn't need HRT because I didn't have any hot flashes or any symptoms. I'm like, symptom relief is just the byproduct of HRT. It's just the bonus that you get with it. The reason why you take HRT is to protect your body later in life. Whereas people think by not taking it, they're somehow protecting their body. I'm like, by not taking it, you're harming your body. Like, people are like, oh, but I cannot come off HRT. I didn't need HRT. Like, didn't need it for what? And they go, I didn't need it for, I didn't have any hot flashes or any menopausal symptoms. And I'm like, it's not a drug to alleviate symptoms. It's a cure for later in life. It's like a preventative measure for later in life. And they're stunned, Tina. They're like, really? Is it not to for you to feel better? And like, the pharmaceutical industry has done us such a disservice because it's made women believe that HRT is literally to help you feel better. Whereas that's the byproduct of it. It's not the purpose.
But they don't realize that the thing that they don't realize, because was my whole practice for 20 years, was they don't realize that their hips dissolving and their knees dissolving and their gluteal tendinopathy on both sides of their hips where they can't lay down, or their shoulder freezing. They don't put, or their bilateral elbow pain that won't go away, or their TMJ that won't go away. They don't realize that's estrogen leaving the body. And they think that's just getting old and wear and tear. And so every patient that walked into my clinic, I was like, we're running your hormones and we're treating your hormones, because I'm not going to inject you with stem cells or PRP or exosomes or something fancy and expensive when the root cause of your chronic migraines or your chronic joint pain or your frozen shoulder is really hormonal in nature. And that's the part that I made a reel about it the other day, and I had women coming in saying, well, I had both my hips, like, you're wrong, because I had both my hips replaced and I feel great. And I'm like, your hips melted because your estrogen waned. Like, you literally just proved my point, lady. You know, like, it's so crazy what this bill
badge of honor
bullshit bill of goods that women got sold, especially our generation, because that Women's Health Initiative came out and it quite literally stopped an entire generation of women from taking hormones, and it stopped doctors from prescribing it, and it made them hormone illiterate. So these doctors were not only afraid to prescribe it, but they quit learning how to. So now there's our generation and women like you and I and so many others finally standing up. Like Gen X is like, oh, hell no. I mean, we do not need to be looking like the Golden Girls, you know, like we can be hot and healthy and vibrant. And I'll leave the conversation with this on that topic is like, how's your vagina doing? For all these women who are so staunchly anti-hormone, I'm like, are you having sex every day? Because I am, and my vagina lubricates well. And my libido's solid, like better than ever, right? Because I'm finally at this phase of my life where I have this incredible body confidence and I feel good and I have a hot husband. I'm going to use it. So like, they're barking up the wrong tree, because I'm wondering what kind of life they're leading and what kind of, you know, intimacy they're actually having or not having. You know, it's like, is it a desert down there, or are you
a desert and a forest? It's a terrible thing to say. And I think you're right. And I think that one of the things, you know, and I think just to finish, I think that what I have learned is that women genuinely are very cut off from their bodies. Like I think, you know, and I'm a big advocator, not against schools. I think schools have a purpose, but I homeschooled my 4 kids. I didn't put them in the education system because I did not want anyone else educating my children. And I think that one of the things that school does is it teaches us to take information that we're given on good faith, to absorb it as our own, to not question it because the teachers are gods. And, you know, teaches people to be institutionalized, to believe what the government tells them, the doctor tells them, you know, this person in authority is telling you this thing. So no matter what you think about yourself or however you feel, doesn't matter. It's not important. What they know better for you, what's good for you. And so I think that we raise this cohort of human beings who are so cut off from themselves that they really they don't know, they can't evaluate data, and they don't feel confident to make a decision for themselves. I had a conversation with a friend recently, and she came out of her doctor's office. She went and asked for HRT, and she came out and she was like, oh no, they wouldn't give it to me. And I was like, what do you mean they wouldn't give it to you? You're 48. You can't sleep at night. Your temperature on your Oura ring is spiking. You have all of the symptoms. You're having constant migraines around your cycle. Like, why would they not give it to you? And she said, well, they just said that they wanted to, you know, they might consider it, but they want to do a saliva test. They want to do this, and do that. And I was like, well, what did they say whenever you fought back? And she was like, when I what? And I was like, when you fought back, when you said, this is bullshit. I waited 2 months for this appointment. I'm not fucking leaving here without my hormones. Give them to me. And she went, oh no, that doesn't work in America. And I went, have you ever tried it? And she was like, no. And I was like, oh my God, I want to come across and shake your doctor. Like, you know, it was like, and she was so sweet about it. And she's one of my best friends. But I was like, I walk in and I go, okay, here's my symptoms. Here's what I'm experiencing. Here's the research I've done. Here's what I've decided that I want. Here's the protocol I expect to follow. But you're the clinician. So give me your professional opinion on the data I presented. And they're quite often like, oh, wow. Oh, okay.
Amen.
Right.
Amen.
And then we have an informed conversation where I present data, they present data, I push back, they push back. And then we come to a decision based on data and experience. And I said, well, I'm happy to make this decision and take this. I'm happy to try this. I'll come back in 3 months for a blood test and we'll see where we are. I'm like, but anyway, I think that this is what, and if I can leave my listeners with something, it's like, please don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. The doctors are not gods.
Yes.
They're not like the teachers. You don't have to fear them. They're not, they just, they want to help you feel better, but they're scared to prescribe off label. They just want to follow the protocol. And you have to advocate for yourself, but you have to get to know your own body and know tiny little micro changes in it and what happens to it so you can make decisions about your care for your body. It's so important.
Oh, amen. No, you're speaking my language, because that is, I mean, that's 1,000% why I let the public into my course, was because
Mm-hmm.
I am such a staunch
Tell
believer.
us,
Well,
tell us more about your course.
it's
Well,
empower
let's sell it. Tell everyone why they need to buy it.
it's empowerment through education, right? There's a document in there that's, gosh, it's like almost 50 pages at this point. It's all the data on GLP-1s. Like there's literally there's not an argument anyone can make against GLP-1s at this point, because all the data is just inside this one document alone. There's 8 modules. Module 8, I will say, it is tip to toe the most recent data on every system of the body. And so I get asked a lot, will GLP-1s treat this? This is not about prevention or treatment or cure. This is about optimizing homeostasis in your organ systems and utilizing a peptide to help you do that. It's a different way of looking at it, right? Does that make sense? Like, this is not a take this drug for this thing. And so I make sure that each one of these lessons inside module 8 is so beefy and comprehensive and data backed that you can literally print it off and take it to your doctor and be like, like you said, let's go. Like, do you want to have
let's evaluate this?
Yeah, like, because it's all in there. I don't know if there's anyone else on this planet who has been swimming through the data on GLP-1s more than I have. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but like, this has literally been my obsession. I have severe OCD when I lock onto something, and I locked onto this. So I've got it. There's a whole module on how to find a doctor, how to talk to your doctor. And if that doesn't work, what are your next best steps, right? How do we get what we need to get? There's an entire module on my dosing strategy so that people really understand what I mean when I say personalized, individualized dosing. There's not an algorithm. Everybody always hounds me and says, you're gatekeeping. What's the dose? I'm like, it depends. It depends on the person. It depends on their age and their gender and their body composition and their needs and their short-term goals and long-term goals. There's a whole module on why strength training is non-negotiable and what exercise does for you and how it ties into GLP-1s. There's a whole beefy hormone module in there. So you really understand what each hormone's doing and what the hierarchy is of how to apply it, so that women and men can get so well educated that they can go in and have these educated conversations with their doctors and really advocate for themselves. And if that doesn't work, you find a different doctor and you keep looking. I think, to hit on what you said, most people are just giving up. They give up and that's it. And I'm like, you do know that even though you have to go through, some of these people really do have to go through insurance. They don't have the luxury of having the financial means like we do to just fire and hire whoever we want, right? They can just get a new doctor even within the system. They can request a new primary doctor, a new OBGYN. Like, it really requires you to advocate for yourself, but you can only do that if you're well educated. And that is literally the entirety of that course. That is why I built it. The free course is beautiful. It's 4 videos. It's stripped out each day. So you get a new video each day, because I don't want people to ignore any of it. I want them to listen. And they're short videos and they're really, really in depth. But if they want the deep dive into the course and they want to know how to do this right, that's what the GLP-1 Done Right University is. And as they go through the 4-part video series, they'll be invited to purchase the course, I think on day 3, and they'll get it at a discounted offer. But with your coupon code, they're going to get a better deal. So they can go ahead and grab even a better deal on it at the time and get it's a beefy discount that I give. But it's my life's work. Literally, I spent a year building it out and I put my life's clinical knowledge into this course, and I'm not bullshitting. The reason was, if anything ever happens to me, I needed it to be in the internet. Like, I needed, because I truly have been practicing in a bubble, and not when I came out online and started talking about some of this stuff, the pushback I got from doctors and the public made me realize, wow, I'm really doing things differently here. And I don't think that they understand how this works. Like, this isn't, I never knew. Honestly, I did not know that doctors weren't prescribing hormones the past 20 years. I literally had no idea. I've been so busy in my practice, and I've always had a very busy, successful practice. I've just been cranking it out, thinking this was the norm, using compounding pharmacies, using bioidentical hormone replacement. And then come to find out, like, all of that is just, when I started talking about compounding pharmacies, people were like, what is that? I did not have a clue that this was not common knowledge. So I'm glad it's in the course. And if that's not available for folks, there's a ton of free content on my podcast. So,
well, you better get me a discount code quickly, because I'm gonna literally, my audience are like, when's the interview with Dr. Tina? When's the interview with Dr. Tina? So I'm literally gonna get this edited and out as fast as possible. So we'll get it in the show notes, but I'll link to it anyway. Like, I don't even mind if there's not a discount code, but you get a discount code for my members, but we'll definitely get the course out there ASAP. We'll get it in the show notes. You guys can go find it wherever you're watching this. If you're listening to this on Podbean or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go to the description. If you're watching it on YouTube, go to the description. People always say, where's the show notes? I'm like, it's just the fancy word for the description.
Yes.
Tina, where else can our members, we could talk all day. I'm like, oh my God, I've literally been on for hours.
I know. I want to bring you on my podcast. I was like, I just want to continue this conversation.
Me too. Name the date and I'll be there with bells on. Tell me, where can my listeners find you if they wanted to connect with you, or like, where would be the best place to do that?
Everything is Dr. Tyna, DrTyna, Tina with a Y. So Instagram is probably where I'm most active. YouTube, the podcast, my website's drtyna.com. Everything is just Dr. Tyna. So find me there and check it out. And I'll leave with this, because I'm not trying to sell somebody something. I had a follower message me today, and she said, because I got some shit from somebody saying I was gatekeeping, and she wrote me and she said, this person's so off base. If they were to actually sit down and listen to every single one of your podcasts, she's like, I've literally binged your content and you have given every answer for free inside there. So it's in there. Like, for people who want, I'm not saying like, it's a lot of content, but for those who really want to know more, I promise you, it is my life's work to just make sure that I get my clinical brain down for free onto the internet. The course, it's just organized and it's in depth, right? But there's a lot out there. So have fun with it and get yourself educated, because these peptides are not going anywhere. Whether you hate them, whether you're vehemently against them and you're mad at us right now, your mom and your best friend are probably still going to take them. So you better get educated around them.
Well, I'm going to just add to what you've said and said, you absolutely should sell what you have created. I have make no bones about it. People have been saying to me, oh, you just want to make money off this? I'm like, of course I want to make money off this. Like, the more money I have, the more power I have to do good in the world. And I am one of the fucking good ones. So do you know, yes. I always say, do you not think like the bad people in the world are motivated to get as much money as they possibly can? Of course they are. So like, I believe that good people should be as motivated to get as much money as they possibly can, so they can do more good in the world. And why shouldn't you profit off the years of experience and expertise and training that you have done to help other people? Like, I am 100% on board for that, and I make absolutely no qualms about it. So I don't think you should ever apologize for promoting what you have created, because there was a lot went into it, and I'm more than happy to promote it for you.
30 years of clinical knowledge is in there. I do have
that all 30 years.
That's how long I've been at this. I do have a very helpful free resource I will mention, though. It's at drtyna.com/find a doc. And all it is a video, because I get asked so often, you asked this during the podcast too, is like, how do you find someone to work with? It's free, and it's a video of what I would look for in a doctor. I can't make personal referrals, so please don't email me. And I can't help you with your own personal medical questions. I always get bombarded with them. I can't legally do either, but I have that resource for folks if they want to learn like this. If I were looking for a doctor like me, this is what I would go look for. And I think it's I spent a lot of time making it. It's a valuable resource. So it's just a video, and it's right there on my website as well.
Thank you. I love that, because people are asking me, oh, so what should I do this and what should I do that? And I'm like, not a doctor, like totally new to this whole thing, not the person to advise you.
Yeah. And don't send me a novel either, because I legally cannot give medical advice over the internet, and I won't, and I can't make referrals. So
no, I know. Tina, you have been absolutely amazing. Thank you for bearing with me while I got my technical issues sorted in the beginning. This was awesome. And I love that we're friends now. I'm like, you just meet someone, you just click. I really felt that with you. Like, we just met and we were like, we're kindred spirits. And It's wonderful. So I really would love to continue this conversation. If my listeners love it, maybe we can do a part 2 at some point. I think that it's so important, or maybe a menopause,
Yeah.
touching on menopause stuff or whatever, because I know that you're a bona fide expert in that. That would be absolutely awesome. So
I would love it.
thank you so much for being here. This was amazing. And I hope to speak to you again soon. And we're going to link to everything in the show notes.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.